Hi guys, and welcome. In today's lesson, we're going to be discussing the instruments of a weatherman, the tools a weatherman uses to help him predict the weather, as well as some of those rules he uses for prediction. So let's go ahead and get started. If you look at these six pictures are the six tools we will be talking about today. We'll get a little more in-depth with them, but starting top left, going across, and then down to bottom right, you have a wind vane, an anemometer, a barometer, thermometer, rain gauge, and ruler. So the first of our instruments is the weather vane. Now, if you take a look at this is something that always makes me think of like old farm movies. You know, you think of seeing them up on top of the barn. You've got that chicken there like it's crowing. Weather vanes are used to tell the direction that the wind is coming from. Now keep that in mind. It's telling us the wind direction, but it's not necessarily pointing in the direction the wind is going. The weather vane will then end up telling us the direction the wind is coming from, which really, if you think about it, in turn tells you which direction the weather is going. If it's coming from the south, it's moving to the north. But weather folk usually speak about the rain or the wind and its rules in the direction that it comes from. So if we look at some of those rules, one of the main ones tells us that the weather or the wind from the south will bring warmer temperatures. If you know how temperature and at least part of that works, the further south you go, the warmer it gets. The closer you are to the equator, the warmer and more steadily warm the temperatures are. So those two things correlate. If the wind is coming from the south, it's going to be carrying those warmer temperatures with us. Now, if that southerly wind and warmer temperatures are followed by a drop in the temperature, that is one of the predictors that a storm is incoming. So southerly winds mean warmer temperatures, and the drop in temperature following that will usually mean a storm. The next of our tools was the anemometer. Now, if you look at those little cups, you'll notice they're all kind of turned the same direction. That cup is meant to grab the wind. So as the wind is blowing, that cup grabs the wind, which would then push the spin around. So that is helping us measure the wind speed. There's calculations put into that, but basically, as it turns out, the faster that is spinning, the faster the wind is blowing, which seems like common sense. I mean, the faster the wind is moving, the faster it's going to make that move. It was the same idea with like our pinwheel. The faster the wind is blowing, the faster the pinwheel is going to spin. So as far as wind goes, one of the things that we do know is that a windy day will often mean a change in weather. Now this is because you have this weather here sitting with you, and a wind blows in, it's going to blow that weather out and bring whatever this weather is in with it. So the windy days will often mean a change in weather. If you have nice weather and then it starts to get windy, that could possibly mean that a storm is blowing in. Or if it's stormy and it gets windy, that could possibly be the storm blowing out. Now, depending on how big the storm is, the wind could last for a while before you get to the end of the storm. But that windy weather will often mean a change in the storm. Our next tool is the barometer. Now, I remember growing up, my grandma had one of these in her house, and I'm not quite sure what good it did. I don't know if there was a cord running, but a barometer measures the air pressure. Now, air pressure is one of the most important predictors that a weatherman will use to know what the weather's doing. Now remember, air pressure is just basically as it sounds, like the air is always pushing on you. Now if you think about heat rising, okay, so hot air going up a warmer day is going to give you a lower air pressure because the air is pulling up rather than being pulled down on you by gravity. So that means colder days, okay, that hot air is going to be going up somewhere else, and the cooler air is being pushed down on you. So warmer air will bring you a lower air pressure. Cooler air will bring you a higher air pressure. So if you're sitting on a sunny day, and then suddenly that air pressure starts to lower, that could mean that it's circulating a storm in. So if we look at that, a drop in air pressure means the rising air has moved out. Okay, you've got the rising air and the wind is circulating. That drop in air pressure will usually mean that there is a storm coming in, or it could at least possibly predict that. So that's one of our main indicators for storminess, is that air pressure, that shift in air pressure. Higher air pressure usually means better days, but a drop in the air pressure typically means that a storm is coming. We're all familiar with the thermometer, which measures air temperature. One of the main things that a thermometer can help us to predict is not necessarily if a storm's coming, because I mean I love a good warm spring rain. So the temperature doesn't necessarily predict the precipitation, but it can help us predict what kind of precipitation. So if our temperatures are above 32 degrees, remember that 32 degrees is our freezing point of water. If it is above the 32 degrees, your precipitation is going to be rain. If it's at 32 degrees, which means it's right at that freezing temperature, you might have some of it thawed, some of it frozen. This mixture of frozen and thawed water we usually refer to as sleet. And then below 32 degrees, you're going to see snow. So above 32 degrees rain, at 32 degrees sleet, or below 32 degrees is snow. That is the one thing that the temperature can really help us predict with weather, is what kind of precipitation we will have. This fancy little gadget here is what we call a rain gauge. It catches the rain. I mean, there's not a whole lot more to it. The word gauge tells us a measurement. You've got a speed gauge in a car that tells you the speed. So that gauge just tells us that it's going to be some kind of measurement. Rain gauge tells us that it's going to be measuring the rain. You can see it kind of funneled up top there. As the rain comes down, it catches it and then drops it down into the tube. And basically, the higher the water level gets there, you can kind of see right in here, it's going to show you how much rain has fallen. And then our final one was the ruler. Now, a ruler seems simple, like we use rulers to measure in class. We use rulers to draw a straight line. The main thing a ruler can tell us is the amount of snowfall, so the depth of the snow. Now, depending on where you are, if you're up in the mountains, you might need a ruler bigger than a foot like we're used to, because some winters the mountains can get, 3, 4, 5, 8 feet of snow. So one simple ruler is not going to be enough to tell you that. But the idea is still the same, that ruler helps us to measure the depth of the snowfall. So that kind of wraps us up. We had those 6 tools. The wind vane, which told us the direction of the wind, usually where the wind is coming from, but if we know where the wind is coming from, we do know where it's blowing to. The second picture there being the anemometer. Those balls catch the wind and force it to spin. The faster it's spinning, the higher the wind speed, the faster the wind is blowing. The third picture up top there is the barometer, which tells us air pressure. Now, generally speaking, the air pressure is what can most commonly help us predict what the weather's going to be like outside. You can see on the barometer there, stormy, rain, change, fair, or very dry. Depending on that air pressure, it'll help you be able to predict what's going to happen with the weather. The thermometer usually mostly helps us predict what type of precipitation we're going to have if it's coming. Now remember, precipitation has to come from clouds. So it could be cold, but if there's no clouds in the sky, you're probably not going to be getting precipitation. Or it could be hot, and there are clouds in the sky, and if precipitation falls from those clouds, you know it's going to be rain because it's not freezing. Our next picture here is the rain gauge, which catches the rainfall and tells us how much rain has come down, or using a ruler to measure the depth of the snow. So those are the 6 main tools that a weatherman, a meteorologist, would use to help him predict the weather. Use this information to help you fill out the weather charts that are your assignment. If you have to, please refer back to this video to help you answer some of those questions. Also, remember, you can always feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions that this video nor the worksheet help you to understand.